Hi, it's Olivia with Brighter Connections Counseling, and welcome to another video on crafting and grief. As you know, when a loved one dies, it can be an overwhelming adjustment to a new reality. While they're still with us in many ways, it's not the same as it was before. One natural thing that we tend to do as part of this adjustment is we tend to reintegrate them back into our lives in new ways. One way that we can do this is through the rituals that we have around celebrations, like birthdays, holidays, and that sort of thing. And that's what this craft is all about. We're going to be making a printing block for wrapping paper that honors your loved one. And in this way, you can continue to spread their love and their joy with every gift that you give. So let's get started. So for this craft, you're going to need a few materials. You're going to need a rubber block or a linoleum square. This is going to be the surface on which you cut your design for your stamp. You can find something like this at a local craft store or online. If you get a big one, you can always cut it like I have here into any size that you want. I recommend using something soft that's easy to cut. I have heard of people even using a potato. The only reason why I would not recommend that for this craft is because you will have to throw the potato away at some point and might not be able to use the same thing from occasion to occasion. You're also going to need a cutting tool. I've got this one, it's a little kit. Wasn't very fancy, but it does come with some different size cutting heads that you can insert into the tool. There's lots of options online and maybe even at the local craft store or art supply store. You're also going to want a brayer. So this is actually for rolling on paint. We're going to have some paints. I just have regular acrylic paint that you will apply to your brayer here. This rolls and to apply the paint evenly. And that will make sense later when you see it. So the first thing that we'll want to do is create your design. Now I have a piece of paper right here that I'm using to sketch out my design before I add it to my block. When thinking about your design in a way that represents or honors your loved one, here are a few ideas. You can look for connections between things like their name, things that they loved. So for one example, an idea that I have for a block print is to use a bumblebee or like a picture of a bee. I'm just gonna because my loved one had a bee sound prominently in their name, and so sometimes they would even use a bee as a signature for themselves. So a bee stands out really strong for me for one of my loved ones. Thinking about their name, thinking about things that they enjoyed, hobbies that they had. Was it someone that played sports? Was it somebody that enjoyed a particular kind of food? So there are a lot of symbols and images that we can draw from to represent our loved one, to bring them in to this craft visually. Another example I have is a loved one who really loved, they have a favorite flower of tulips. So you can also look online and see a good picture of a reference photo. Now, something to keep in mind about block printing is that when you have the image on your block, when you put it on paper or on a surface, it's going to be a reverse of what's on the block. So if you're using letters, make sure you draw them on backwards. Another thing to note is that on your block, whatever part of the surface is raised is going to receive color. It's going to pick up your paint. So let's go ahead with, I feel like the tulip is probably going to be the most simple one for me right now. So I'm gonna start with that. And I'm going to just make a simple outline of a tulip. Now, I have two options. I could cut the flower part out so that I have a silhouette that receives paint, and this part will be raised and this part will be lower. So the silhouette will be the one that shows up on your paper. Or I could cut the background out so that the flower is the part that stands out on the paper and receives ink. I'm going to cut out the background because I want the flower to stand out and receive the ink. Now I'm going to pick out which carving tool I want to use, which carving head I want to use with my tool. And I'm going to pick this one because it's more pointy, and I feel like I can get maybe a little bit more of a precise cut. And we're just gonna like carve and scoop out bits of this rubber. I'm going to start on my outline, and I'm going to just kind of follow the edge of the flower by making a little scoop. Here you can see that, and I've scooped out a bit of the rubber. Okay, now you can see I've made quite a bit of progress here, just cutting away. After I cut the perimeter of my drawing, then I started to cut away the background of the block as well. You can see there's an interesting pattern out here developing, which is a cool part of block printing. When you're cutting and carving away, it tends to create an interesting pattern in the background. Sometimes that pattern gets picked up by the paint. If you don't want that, just make sure you keep carving it down so that these raised parts aren't picking up the paint if you don't want it to. So my camera had cut out earlier and I didn't get a chance to show you the finished block, the finished stamp here, after I had carved away the outside of the flower. It has a little bit of yellow on it because I've already printed with it, but I just wanted to go back so you could see how it looked when it was finished. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just put a kind of blob of paint here on my paper. You can use a paper plate or any kind of surface where you can roll your paint out. So I want to get my brayer nice and covered in a layer of paint. It's a little bit of fine tuning because you don't want a super thick layer of paint on your brayer, but you do want enough to coat it. And then you're going to spread it on your design, and you'll see why we use something flat like a brayer, because we don't want paint on that part that we've cut. So the brayer helps it stay just on the raised part. Give it a nice coating, and okay, that's actually pretty decent. It got pretty much all on the flower and not on the part that I cut. It's probably a first for me. All right, I've got my wrapping paper here and I'm ready to make my print. And there we are. So here is how my stamp turned out, my tulip stamp on my butcher block paper. There's such a variation between the flowers, really makes it interesting. And it's a pretty clear print. It makes a nice pattern. And it really makes me think about my loved one when I see it. I hope this can be a craft that you can use also as you continue to honor your loved one in different ways and bring them into your celebrations. Thanks for watching.